Hi, my name is Adim West, and I made a promise to myself that I would start sharing more in the upcoming new year. And I thought, well, what better time than now to just get started? And I wanted to first start with my thoughts on Peter J. Carroll's Liber Knull and Psychonaut. I, like many others, use the literature in my home as a reference for whenever app situations or similar situations that were referenced in the book, come up in life, and so that I can refer back to them and go back to them. That's the same thing. So this is how the story goes for me. After binging on TikTok, like pretty much everybody does now, for about 30 or 40 minutes, I started to just feel like this ephemeral emptiness, just like nothing mattered, nothing was important. Like, why am I doing this? Not like why I'm on TikTok, but just why am I just trying to go through the rest of the day? And it was very weird to me. And I wanted to take that feeling and transmute it, because I didn't like that feeling. I didn't want that feeling. I didn't want to sit with that feeling. And I didn't want to just carry on with that emotion. I'm laying in bed. I want to have a good time before I go to sleep and then have to get up and go to work tomorrow, just like everybody. So I said I wanted to transmute that energy into its opposite. So I referred to Peter J. Carroll's Liber Knull and Psychonaut to go back and reference the alphabet of desire, which I could have just done on my phone now that I'm thinking about it. But I'm like, nah, I just went to the book. I went to the book instead and, just found the page on the alphabet of desire and use that to then just find my notes and then find ways to help with transmuting that emotion into its opposite. And I just read through the score of notes that I had under the Malkuth and the somatic emotions. And I, just was saying to myself, I'm just going to keep reading. I'm just going to keep reading since I'm feeling a little better, since I'm processing that emotion and working toward its opposite. I then said, well, then I'll just keep reading. I then get to his Millennium theory. And something just a download just came over me about a thought and just how they were just also similar to what I think that most of us are experiencing in our daily lives today. In Carroll's Millennium theory, he theorized that we would experience 5 deaths before transitioning into this new consciousness, this new eon of chaos and chaos magic, like chaosism and chaos philosophy. And as I'm reading them here, he said that the 5 deaths would be the death of spirituality, the death of superstition, of identity, of belief, and of ideology. Now, while I'm going through all of them, I'm like, okay, I definitely see all of these happening, but I'm like, okay, so then what is the best way to protect yourself against all of them? And then I'm going through, and then like I was saying, it's just a download came over me as I was reading through them, and I'm like, I have to share this. And the caveat is that I couldn't think of ones or defenses against the very last one, which would be death of ideology. And that's why I wanted to share this video, because I really wanted to see if anyone out there had the knowledge or the experience on how to deal with this, or if they've already experienced it in their generation's lifetime, or in my generation. I'm a millennial. If anyone in my generation knows best ways to counteract this, with practical means or with magical knowledge or magical defenses, I really wanted to just open that up to community. I really think that in the age of Aquarius, that community is important, and that sharing and the dissemination of information is really important. So I was hoping that in me sharing my thoughts, that someone would then share something in kind, just the reciprocation was my hope. Okay, so further breakdown into his Millennium theory. So Carroll states that we've experienced as humans 4 eons of consciousness to date. Shamanic animism being the first, paganism, monotheism, and atheism, which we're currently in. I would surmise that as secularism. And as I mentioned before, Carroll theorizes that the 5th and impending philosophy that's going to come about, and the next eon of consciousness is going to be chaosism philosophy, but that would be preceded with 5 deaths. So let's start with the very first one, the death of spirituality. I'll put it here also so that you can read along. The death of spirituality, that this will be fixed ideas about a central spirit or nature of humans will be completely abandoned as an emotional technology becomes more refined. Drugs, obscure sexualities, faddism, strange entertainments, and material sensationalism are a preliminary groping towards this end. Chemicals, electronics, and surgery will only tend to enslave. Gnosis, the alphabet of desire, and other magical methods tend to liberate. When I first read this, I said to myself, like, wow, that's so poignant just because of, like a millennial growing up in the age of social media and all of the advancements with technology. I'm like, that's definitely something that we've experienced. I just mean like with the Instagramification and the TikTokified versions of literally everything, like even down to it being off platform, right? Like, like the transformation of the way that even like commercials are shot and marketed towards us now. It just is so different. When I think of just like when he mentioned about escapism, I live in Philly, right? So I'm thinking about just like the rampant drug use that just exists in the world, but like it's like specifically in my city, like Kensington, which is a neighborhood in Philadelphia, is one of the largest open air drug markets in the country, in the US. It's one of the epicenters of the opioid epidemic. Drugs like opiates and heroin and things that's nothing new. Like they've been around for forever, and people have been using the drug for as long as it's been available to them, right? And this isn't really a conversation on substance abuse. It's just more about the lengths to which people will go to escape. And I think that drugs like fentanyl and tranq, it's like so much stronger. Drugs like carfentanil, they're just so much stronger. And just the lengths that people will go to escape that feeling that haunts them, I think is very telling of the time and very telling of of what Carroll theorized about the death of spirituality. Everyone's trying to escape from something, the feeling of being in your body or just something. Another telltale sign would probably be the ease of use of consumerism, just like with Amazon, and how you can literally go and buy just about anything. Just about anything at any time, anywhere, any place, and have it delivered to your door. Sometimes like within the hour, sometimes overnight, and at max like 2 days. That's like what Amazon's thing is prime delivery, be to you in no later than 2 days if they can help it. It just reminds me of a creator on YouTube whose videos I love, Heaven Sent Honey, where she was mentioning that things in your life that are ugly and what you should stay away from, like the majority of the topics on her page are about beauty. And I just thought that was so Venusian. One, it was just so Venusian, but two, it just was very telling of the times that we're in, where it's like we don't even handpick anything that we want anymore. It's like, yes, we've sought after it, right? Like we work for it to attain it financially, within Amazon, like on the internet. But it's like it's been picked by someone else, dropped off by someone else, done by someone else, and that's all convenient. But it's like, to what end does this consumerism get us and the people involved in it all the way to the top? It's not a very pretty sight. When he mentions obscure sexualities and faddism, it reminded me of how kink and fetish aesthetics are permeating like commercial places, whereas that used to just be something on the underground, and if you knew, you knew, and you wouldn't really even find out about that unless you went looking, and then you would either know that it was for you and you would stay, or you would know that it's not for you and you would go. Whereas now it's like people are just adapting to whatever culture that they find trendy, and just like wearing leather, wearing kink and fetish gears. And that's not even like, we wear clothes as a way to signify most of the time what our intentions and what our identity is usually what clothing is the signifier of. So when you're wearing kink and fetish gear, it's a very interesting way to signify what it is that you're into and what you want. So that particular instant reminds me of the Balenciaga children's scandal. I think that that is like a very telling thing. One of the ways that I think that you would best or like I would best defend myself during the like magically and spiritually and personally during the death of spirituality phase, which I believe we've already experienced and we're already sitting in, would definitely be meditation. I do yoga, like I try to at least every morning, and stretch because I work from home now, and a lot of my life has become very sedentary, and I've been trying to break out of that. So meditating and silencing my mind, and just the general practice of silence and like existing without a phone for a little bit, or like without having to stare at a screen, or just being around technology for that like little break that I would get in the morning is so helpful for me to just start my day like peacefully and calmly. And I would implore that whoever's watching this would also feel that way too. It's like you just have to think about how much time we spend staring at our phones, and how much time, if we're at work, staring at screens. Like I know that like me staring at screens most of the day like drains me. It just feels so draining, but it's a part of the practice, and we have to defend ourselves as best we can. The second, death of superstition. Carroll reads, prejudice against the possibility of the occult or supernatural will give way in the face of a developing magical technology. Telepathy, telekinesis, and mind influence, hypnosis, fascination, and charisma will be systematically examined, refined, and exploited as methods of control. We may see magicians working behind barbed wire and in underground cells also. This particular death was interesting to me because it reminded me of the amount of research that's being made public about the vying for the control of the subconscious and working with the subconscious as like a fact in scientific communities. There's a study that was recently done where two people were able to communicate in dreams, and it's just there. Two people being able to communicate in their dreams, and it just is so interesting to think about because it then that leads me to the amount of research that was done by the government on like meditation and how with the Gateway Experience research, how the government had found out that like the universe is a hologram, and all of this, all of that information with the other thing that's looming over everyone's heads now about aliens being real and the government willingly admitting that aliens are real, and how world governments are also knowledgeable of aliens and alien technology. It's just like, so they've always known. So then should we be apologizing to like the people on the History Channel? You remember how like the History Channel just became like out of nowhere? It went from like history to being all about aliens like overnight. And I used to watch that and I used to be like, those people are out of their mind. And now like I feel like I owe them an apology. And I think the way to generally defend against this is by doing exactly what you're doing right now. It's about finding community. It's about genuine connections with people. So like, and it's also just about like-mindedness and just having your own like thoughts. I think that in the end, when I was younger, I thought that the folks who believed in aliens were crazy, to say the least. But truthfully, I owe them an apology because now the government is willingly admitting that that's been the case for a long time. They've been trying to reverse engineer it, and they've known that there are other types of beings more than just the ones that they've encountered. So it's like, if you have your thought, you should continue to have that thought, research it well enough to, have the work enough to share with others, because we're in an age where like fact checking is very important, which I'll get into later. You should look for folks who have the same kind of thoughts as you and like-minded community. I think in the age of Aquarius, like I mentioned before, that like dissemination of information is very important. So you should be looking for like-minded folks while also still remaining an individual for yourself, but like still community-based connection is just going to be very important during this time. Third is the death of identity. Ideas about a person's place in society, roles, lifestyle, and ego qualities will lose their hold as the cohesive forces in society disintegrate. Subcultural values will proliferate to such a bewildering extent that a whole new class of professionals will arise to control them. Such a transmutation technology will deal in fashions and ways of being. Lifestyle consultants will become the new priests of our society. Now, this one was by far my favorite. This one was by far my favorite death, which is like so weird to say. So for me, this just instantly reminded me of the self-love and body positivity movements, and like how people who felt like they weren't a part of the larger picture and the larger part of society and weren't being accepted generally have been pushed to the front so that they can speak and say their truth and live in their authentic selves more. And it just reminded me about like influencer marketing shifts and how everyone is shifting towards like everyday people now versus like the hyper elite, the ultra aesthetic that we had all been previously so like obsessed with. Now we're moving towards people who look like everyday people. Like one of my favorite I follow like a lot of fashion people on Instagram because I'm like I really love fashion. It's one of my passions, passion for fashion. And there's a designer who actually used his neighbor to model his latest collection. It's like we're making a shift from it being that ultra fine and ultra finished and ultra polished aesthetic to it being about everyday people, to it being about the collective, to it being about your friends, your family, your network. And if you can't use those people, then you have to expand it so that you can get more. And I just thought that was so beautiful. I'm just like, that is definitely a signifier of this particular death, is that we're moving away from that ultra polished look and we're moving towards just like everyday people. It also reminded me of the support for like more anti-corruption, anti-establishment, anti-war, and the unionizing. It makes me think about folks who were very supportive online as far as like the dock workers in October of this year, where they were very supportive for the dock workers going on strike and getting that pay raise that they so rightfully deserve. It reminds me of the Whole Foods workers in Philadelphia, in my city, who are unionizing so that they can get better wages, better pay within the Whole Foods. I thought that was definitely a signifier of the time. And I also think that it also spirals all the way down to movements that people might not even think are all that important or all that noticeable. But it reminds me of like the hyper femme and the trad wife trends that are upticking in places like TikTok and social media. It reminds me of people like Nora Smith and Shira 7, and how like people are picking a particular identity and associated it with themselves, and then just making the decision to move in that direction. It's just so telling of the time of that particular death. We're no longer demystified about what isn't available and what isn't right to us. We're just moving with intention and moving with thought. And we're not just going toward the status quo. We're going towards our own particular thought, and then we're moving with it. I think for this, the way that you defend yourself in these times is through transmuting particular energies that come your way that you don't want to have, and then turning that into what you do want it to be. I think utilizing your throat chakra and speaking up and speaking out, you'd be surprised how lucky you are just from boundary setting and saying, verbally that like, I don't want to do that, or I do want to do this. Do you also want to do this? Back to the community building. And I think once again, just like individual and collective thought, I think having your own thought, having your own unique thoughts and opinions within the collective of people who also have their own unique and individual thought and opinions will definitely be, more helpful during this time. As we're seeing, so many people are so willing to jump on a trend and jump on a bandwagon, but don't have their own spin to it. It's like you still have to be yourself in that subculture of a subculture. You still got to do it. Just because you're niche down doesn't mean that you shouldn't still be yourself within that niche. That's what makes the niche a niche anyway. It's like someone did a thing within a thing within a thing. It's the beauty of it. Death of belief. In the death of belief, we will abandon all fixed ideas about what is absolute or valuable and what constitutes morality as a psychological technology develops. Techniques of belief and behavior modification in the military and psychiatry in places of detention, in propaganda, in the schools, and in the media will become so sophisticated that truth will become a matter of who creates it. Reality will become magical. This one was also really fun to ponder upon for me because it reminded me of just like AI and AI generated info and fact censoring. And it's like, it's that thing where like I've seen a bunch of videos where people's grandparents can't tell that certain images are AI generated, and like the younger kids in the family will have to say like, no, that's actually like not real. It's like I can make that right now in like 2 seconds. I can have OpenAI and ChatGPT make this for me like right now. And fact censoring at the same time. It's like how AI is the information made magical. AI gives us access to anything at our fingertips. It's able to create and generate its own art. It's able to create and generate its own funds. It's able to create and generate its own jobs. It's also able to create and generate voices now, even though they're like human voices that have been lended to that software. It still is able to then take that and then change it if it wished. Anybody can access it. I can go on my phone and use it right now. And it also makes me think about how for Peter Carroll, as he's writing this in the late 70s and then had the revised version in the 80s, for him, this would have been Internet 1.0. And then later, as he experienced, it would have been Internet 2.0, which like most millennials and most millennials would have been experiencing at that time too. Now we're moving towards Web 3.0, which is all user generated, consumed, owned, and enforced. Examples of this are Bitcoin and blockchain. It's something that we all can be a part of, generate, consume, own, and enforce in our own way. And soon that's going to just be the transition of like all technology is like moving towards this Web 3.0, which is something that they're actually trying to slow down. But it'll happen regardless. And I think the best defense for this is definitely just being knowledgeable of the technology. I know so many people are like, oh, well, we should just be averse to the technology. But if you're familiar with, Liber Knull and Psychonaut and the teachings of it, and just like other spiritual practices, you know that the aversion of one thing is just leading you right back to the one. So for people who are just very hyper averse to AI technology and technological advances in general, they are going to eventually be met with having to not answer to the technology, but having to deal with it in some way. You're going to come to an impasse in some way. So I think just being in touch with both nature and AI as much as possible in the future, but also even if you don't want to necessarily be in touch with AI and using AI, just be knowledgeable of what is coming with the technology. I think that is helpful too. Just staying ahead of the curve of what is coming in the technology will definitely be important too. And knowing what's available to you if you so choose to use it. Maybe the AI options that they have currently are just not valuable to you, but something that's coming down the future might be. And fact checking. Fact checking is very important now too, because you can just make anything. And then the very last death, the death of ideology. In the death of ideology, ideas about what form human aspirations should take will give way to a science of the preservation of the control mechanism, government, and its agencies. These may become global or semi-global, but their primary concern will become preservation of the government for or against the people. Primitive cybernetics will mushroom into a political technology. Governments will be provided with the choice of either accommodating themselves to coordinating, proliferating human variety or seeking to reduce the variety by repressive measures. Now, I'm not going to lie. This one has definitely made me very nervous and in the efforts of like not fear mongering, because that's not the goal here. I really want to open this up to community because I wasn't really sure what the best defense would be with that ideology. And it just seems so gloomy and like really dark. I think what this immediately reminded me of was the government's latest action to suppress knowledge via the impending TikTok ban. I don't think there's been a platform in my lifetime outside of TikTok where the information is so relatable, so easily digestible, especially in the age of, the goldfish attention span. I don't think that there's been anything like it. I mean, the majority of the articles that I'm sharing are actually from TikTok. They've been sourced from creators on TikTok, and I'm sharing them here. I don't think that the exit or the deletion of TikTok is going to just exist in a vacuum. Like that culture isn't just going to, disappear and vanish. People are still going to want information. People are still going to want their doom scrolling, their dopamine hit. People are still going to want, relatable, funny content of all kinds. It's not just going to go away. So it does worry me that with people becoming more anti-corruption, people pushing for more unionization, people having more class solidarity, what is that going to look like in means for the government who just wants to repress information because they've got, they've been doing more global harm than good, and we're just becoming knowledgeable of it? Where are we going to get our information if everything is so cloak and dagger? We've gotten it in, this short form content style that we've been able to share. What are we going to do? I'm really not sure. And that's what I wanted to ask. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think we can do? And what do you think are some of the best ways to defend ourselves with practical tools and practical means? Community is definitely one, but there are obviously others, and I just don't know what they are. But yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sticking around to watch this video. I really hope that in my next videos that you come back, and I want to respond to some of the comments that I'll get, just so that I can, maybe like expand my theory and go back and revisit some of these. But until next time, thank you.